Hi everyone, myself Anju here. So in this session, in this video, we are going to discuss about the NodePort. So we already completed the cluster IP creation and the cluster IP plus the endpoint creation. So in this, we are going to create the NodePort and how do we create it and how do we access, right? So there is a diagram I've created here. So this is a way actually the NodePort work. So when we have a two pod here, pod 1 and the pod 2, which is running with Nginx. So the AT port is open inside the pods. And we are creating a node port here. So node port is basically used to access the pods from the node itself, from the outside the node servers. So when we discussed about the cluster IP is used to communicate in the cluster itself. Right. So here, node port is actually we can use from the outside from the node server. In the sense, we can use a node server IP address, colon, and the port number. Then that request will be gone to the pods. So when you create a node here, it automatically creates a cluster IP and it creates an endpoint. And that endpoint will be adding those pods IP address. So let's see how to create that. So I have the EC2 server with Kubernetes running. So first thing, I'm going to create the pods here. So first I'll check kubectl get pods. So there is no pods running currently here. So I'm going to create now kubectl run pod 1 -- image is equal to nginx and the second pod 2. Now I can just check kubectl get pods -- show - labels. Right. So already there is one label there in the server. I mean each pod run is equal to pod 1 and pod 2. So we can assign a pod label here, kubectl label pod 1 app is equal to web. Similar way, we can assign the label to the pod 2 also. Then we can check the show labels again so that we can see here each pod got the label called app is equal to web. Right. Now I'm going to create the manifest file for creating the NodePort. So before that, we'll check that any services already existing. kubectl get svc. So there is no service. There is only one. kubectl get pods. There are two pods already we created just now. Next, I'm going to create a manifest file for the NodePort.yaml. And in that, I can say API version colon v1 and type it's service only. Enter metadata colon. Enter name of the service. I'll say my NodePort service. You can give any name. And spec colon. Under we can say type which one we are going to use. It's called NodePort. So here it will actually say that which type of service we are creating here. Then the selector, we know selector, right? In that we can say that which all the ports need to be part of that. So we can say app colon by just we have given as my app, right? I need to double check. What is the label we have? Web app is equal to web. So we need to say that instead of my app, we need to say web here. Enter pods colon enter hyphen port space 80 and target port 80, then node port. So that 30080, right? So that is what we have showed in the diagram. Same thing I have created here. So this is a API version V1. The kind is service metadata. Name of this service is my NodePort service. The spec type, we are saying it's a NodePort. Selector, we are saying that which all the ports need to be part of this. So we have mentioned that label name here. Ports, under ports, there is one port here, 80. So this is a ClusterIP port, basically the service port. So when I check that diagram, we can see that here, the ClusterIP it is using 80 port, right? And when I check that, the target port, this is actually the container or the pod port number. So each pod has running with the port 80. Here also, the port 80 is running in the second pod also. And in the diagram, we can see there is a node port. Node port is actually 30080. So that same configuration only, 30080. It's called node port, which will be creating on the server itself, on the node itself. This port will be open in the node itself. So just save the file, kubectl apply -f node port YAML, and we can check kubectl get svc. So we can see there is one service created, right? Which is called my port, and it says at node port. And when I say describe of this kubectl describe svc and tell about the name of the service. We can see here that there is an endpoint created for this node port, which means it is actually created a cluster IP also behind. Then it created an endpoint also. So using that, we are able to, it's automatically creating. When we create a node port, it's actually creating a cluster IP plus an endpoint. And that endpoints, that IP address will be updated. So when I say kubectl get endpoints, we can see here. So there is no, it won't create a separate resource for a cluster IP itself. And so when I create a node port, that along with that, the cluster IP also created along with that. So this is a way actually this created. So this is a cluster IP address, and only the type is changed here. It's called node port. Okay. So when I try to access, how do we access this node port? So for that, this server where we are running this Kubernetes, that server need to expose that the port what we have specified here, right? So 30080, the port number. So we can just go to our, I'm using the AWS console. So I can just go there. Click on that EC2 instance. Select the instance. Go to the security tab. Scroll down. You can see the security group ID here. Just click on that. Edit inbound rule. We can see here there is inbound and outbound rule. Click on the edit inbound rule. Add a new entry here, custom TCP. Put that port number 30080. Make it for public so that everybody can access. Yeah. 30080. Now we need to get the EC2 instance IP address. Click on the EC2 instance. So just go up, go to the detail. We got the public IP address. Click on the new tab. Here we can type http:// put that IP address, 30080, the port number of NodePort. See, we can see this Nginx web page, the default web page from the ports. So in the diagram clearly shows that here the Nginx is running and we are accessing this node port from the node IP address. Then the request will comes to this cluster IP. Then cluster IP will forward that to the endpoint. So the endpoint will have that all the ports IP address. Then the request will goes to the ports which is behind the endpoint. Then it will be returning back the Nginx default web page to the source, right? So that is the reason we were able to see that default web page. So thanks everyone. So we have discussed about the NodePort and how that cluster IP created behind of that automatically. I hope you have understand this class and we'll see in the different topic.